All right, so this is Loadout. This is what I've been working on for my desktop application for this week in Gauntlet. It's an AI-powered desktop app that I built using Electron, React, and using LangGraph for pretty much the entire back end of this project. This desktop app is designed to take in user ideas in this little text box here, and then it will create a development blueprint with generated UI code that the user can take from here and immediately put into, I mean, presumably Cursor, because this is designed for people who are using AI to help them write code. Because what this does is because when I start a new project, what I end up doing is talking to a bunch of different AI tools. I'll talk to ChatGPT, I'll talk to Anthropic, I'll talk to V0. Because the thing is, I want to use each specific AI model for what it's specifically good at. Because each thing is going to be better at a different thing than another model is, and I want my stuff to be as the best it could possibly be. So that reflects in how I plan and start executing out that plan. So the problem with that approach is since none of these tools have the same context, they're not talking to each other. They don't even really know that the other things exist until they like search the web and everything. A lot of information can be lost. Things they'll be out of sync with each other. They'll make assumptions that the other stuff didn't think about, or that you gave to the other thing but didn't to the first thing, and it can cause a lot of different problems and like just desync problems that when you try to start working, you're like, oh, why did none of them tell me about this? And it's just the way that you ask several different models. So this is meant to fix that. So we can kind of go into this text box here. I have a test prompt that I've been working with to test things out. Basically, it's just this is giving an idea of like, hey, I want to make a clone that's like Grammarly, but for this group of people, the users should be able to do this, they should do that, and all this other stuff. But you can click this refine with AI button, and then now this chat interface will pop up, and you're talking with in the back end. You're just talking with ChatGPT, and it's going to ask you questions based off of this, like, hey, what are you doing about user privacy? Are you going to do rate limiting? Are you going to allow different languages other than English? And how are you categorizing your errors and all this other stuff? And basically, you go back and forth with this AI until you feel that it's good enough to generate your project. And when you feel that's good, you can click this generate button, which we can do that here. And as you can see, this process will take a bit, which is why I'm like, hey, I'm going to showcase this to the user. So our process, we have all the different nodes that that this process goes through. Will show up here. You can see which one is currently being worked on, which ones are done, and which ones have yet to even be started. But since this takes a while, I'm like, hey, maybe I want to work on something else. But you can go look through all your other stuff. This is still working in the background. But while this is going on, we can go through my LangGraph setup. And a bit of a spoiler, there are some parallel processes going on. But basically, through the power of LangGraph and Mermaid, I have this cool little diagram that is it's updated dynamically based off of my node and edge setup. So, but we start off here at the start, which is where the second the user clicks the generate button, all the stuff that they talk to in that chat interface is thrown in. Basically, then we pass into this process idea node where it'll clean it up. It'll give it a good title. It'll make it a description into a JSON format. So that way, it gives it a deterministic output for the PRD. And then the PRD node, I gave it a very specific layout. It's like, you should do the PRD in this exact way. And it follows that every single time because you're giving it, the content that's going to be within it is obviously going to be different, but I'm giving it the information the exact same way. So there's very little room for error here. And even when there is an error, it will fill in the blanks as much as it can with fallback data that it gathered from the idea. It will retry. It will power through because there's the beauty of AI models. Regardless of that, whether it succeeds or fails, it will continue because it will have fallback. And as we can see here, we're at UI generation. It tells you all the things that it's making. But now we go on to the parallel execution because these are things that don't need to be weighted. They don't need any of the other two things to start working. And basically this is like generating the UI plan, the brain lift, and the checklist. The checklist, all these things only need the PRD, so we just get them all cranked out at the same time. And the checklist just is like a normal checklist. It looks at the PRD, it'll divide it into phases, and then each of those phases have features and sub-features depending on what the goals are and what the plans are. The brain lift is the standard brain lift that we've talked about, where it'll look for, based off of your target audience, it'll try and find experts, it'll try and find resources that's like, hey, maybe this isn't the marketable maybe this isn't the marketable product you think it is, and it'll try and create a brain lift, and if it will offer you advice based off of that. And then now we have our generate UI plan, which it'll look at, okay, this is what they want. Okay, well, these are the components that we're gonna need. These are, and they need to be styled like this, and it's gonna give a very detailed, like, this is what it should look like, but it doesn't do the actual code generation. And then normally what the process is for determining strategy is it'll either go with V0 or GPT, depending on the complexity of the project and the whether or not the project would actually fall under V0's umbrella, because V0 is absolutely incredible when it comes to UI generation, but only in specific instances when you're dealing with web apps. You can make it work for other things, but it can get a little bit finicky in my experience, which is why I have GPT as a fallback. But for the time being, it just chooses the GPT strategy right off the bat. And then now as you can see, we're at generate UI, which will take all of that UI plan with all these components and everything it needs to look like, and it will do some validation. It'll filter out auth components, because most of the time the user doesn't want, most people, they'll use like Supabase auth, they'll use Clerk, or they'll use Firebase for their authentication, all this other stuff. So the UI code doesn't need to actually worry about generating that. Plus, it will lead to more issues than it would actually solve. It will retry on errors whenever it detects authentication whenever it detects authentication was written. Plus syntax errors as well. It will regenerate it a few times before it's like, okay, something's not right here. We're moving on, and we're gonna get a human in the loop there. And boom. That took a bit, but we saw that it played a little sound effect so that way you can tap out and it'll alert you when you're back. But let's just real quick get back to where we were. That's a syntax error. That's fine. We'll just reload it. There we go. That's something I can work on. But then once it's done with that, it'll validate each of those files. It does another check. Hey, just double checking. It doesn't refer to anything that's going to cause issues. Like, for example, it is not going to refer to a non-existent component. It doesn't refer to authentication that's not supposed to be there. And then what it also does is it'll look for things that are certain things that are referenced. Like if you have a button that routes the user to profile, but for some reason the UI plan didn't include a profile endpoint, this will be like, okay, well, we need to make that profile endpoint then. And it'll be like, okay, we need to make it, and then we regenerate that profile, all the stuff like that. Like it'll be, generally speaking, it's like settings, edit, profile, about things that the UI plan doesn't usually cover because it's more focused on the functionality of the page. And then when it's deemed valid after a few attempts if needed, otherwise it will again just say, all right, something's wrong, we're just going to continue. Then it just kind of does a last preliminary check, make sure that all these things work together, that it's not going to hopefully have an issue. Things will obviously slip through the cracks, because I was erring more on the side of trying to avoid all false positives. I'd rather give it a false negative and there's something wrong with the UI than be like, this is a perfect good UI, but it gave a false positive because of the way that it was formatted or something, but it actually compiles just fine. And then after that, we save the project locally. Everything is done on the disk of the computer that it's being run on, which is really, in my opinion, really awesome, because that way I could avoid having to deal with authentication. Because also a future plan is to allow the users to put in their own API keys for specific models, which then would have to, since everything is only going to be existing on an instance in this computer and only make API calls, I don't have to, it makes it much more secure in the ability to do so. But now we can go over here where you can look at your chat you had with the AI to build this PRD. You can look at your PRD here. It's like, You can, as you can see, it makes a pretty, not, there are some improvements I want to make to this. It feels maybe a little bit short, a little bit, I wanted to make it as detailed as possible. But this isn't the quality of the PRDs I try to make, but for the purpose of this early submission as an MVP, I feel this serves a good purpose. And if it's not good enough for you, you can regenerate. And if you only wanted this PRD document, you could copy it, but we'll show how to export it in a second. It's going to be this export project button. But then here we have a checklist. We have our phases overview, which is like, here's all the different phases. And then here's all the features within those phases with their sub features as well. Like you can see, it's like, hey, the foundation and core infrastructure, we're going to have our project set up. So we need to set up Next.js, our React stuff, and our authentication. It has creates all these features and sub features based off of the PRD. It does automatically check off some stuff. I would like to avoid that in the future because I want give the ability to the user to check and uncheck it, and I don't want the AI to automatically check something that doesn't even work because something went wrong. But now we can look at our UI. We have our preview, and it seems that something went wrong, which is gonna happen. But you can look at your code here. You can see all the different components it made. You can look at the actual code of said components. It appears something went wrong here. We can. The nice thing is we can regenerate that, and it will regenerate that specific UI. But to show that the UI actually does work, it's inconsistent at best. Something I'm working on trying to narrow down, but it does actually make sometimes good UIs. This is not a good example of a good UI. This is an example of I also want to remove this, but this is an example of if it gave me this as like a starting out, I would say I'm happy with that type of thing. It's going to be improved later anyways, because you never stick with the exact same UI the entire way through, at least not usually. And besides, there is this regenerative process as well, where you can just go back and say, I want this to be better. I want it to actually work. But we can take this project, for example, we can click this export project button, and what we can do is we're like, let's just call this demo, and it will compress all of it into a zip, and boom, we can open it up, and it has all the documents that we made. It has your PRD, it has your checklist, has all of your components for it and everything. It seems that our regeneration has gone through, so we can go back and see if it decided if it was actually going to work this time. It seems to have not. Something I'll just be working on. Like I said, there's still some issues with it. Maybe I need to not refresh it. That didn't do anything. But yeah, my main problem right now is just getting consistency with the UI. Sometimes I get a really good one, and then sometimes I get one that doesn't even work, like we just saw in the demo there. And sometimes they're just kind of mediocre. Like this one, technically it's what I asked for, I guess, but it could do better than this. But that's the state of the project right now. Still some things I want to work on, but I'm feeling I made a lot of progress on this so far, and I'm preferring this much more than mobile so far. Looking forward to continuing to work on it.